Welcome into College Football Smothered and Covered. My name is Barrett Salee, episode 5 of the revamped version of the show. We are hanging around the top 100 in Apple Podcasts, so I thank you very much for your support early on in this second half of College Football Smothered and Covered. Of course, about 6 years ago, I had a very successful SEC version of this show. Now we're going national, baby, and we've had a good response so far. Reminder, you can watch this show live on YouTube and Rumble. Still haven't settled on an exact time to go live, but I will tell you when we do. You can also catch it on an audio form, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, Google Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. We will be there. There's a lot to talk about today in college football. It's the off season, right? But there's really no off season. Not to steal a line from Josh Pate, my good friend from Late Kick. I've said this for a very long time too. Now, he has the circle and X'd out. Very clever for Mr. Pate. But there is no off season. You deserve college football 24/7, 365. And that's why we are here. Michael Bratton, SEC Mike, coming up in about 8-9 minutes or so. But first, this isn't a college football ruling, but something in the legal space yesterday could have a big impact on the sport that we know and love. Dartmouth's men's basketball team, a National Labor Relations Board district, ruled that a union vote could happen. Now, not to get too deep in legalese, not a lawyer, although I am 2-0 in my amateur legal career, evicting a tenant from a rental property and also a small claims court on an HVAC system, but not to brag. Maybe bragging a little bit. But basically what this means is that Dartmouth men's basketball players are employees. And that could have ramifications across the entire sports world, college athletics world. And if you remember about, 9-10 years ago, the Northwestern football players tried to do this exact same thing and actually had the same exact result, except it was appealed, it was overturned, and we stayed essentially where we are right now, except obviously with NIL in the mix. Now, this ruling for Dartmouth men's basketball is going to get appealed. After all, what is the motto for administrative issues on this show? Billable hours, they are undefeated. They will always be undefeated. The only winners in this will be lawyers. Now, we could get down to the nitty-gritty. The thing about this is, if you're an employee, you can get fired. So if you don't perform on the field, you can get fired. Okay, that is a massive change. Here's the thing about this, my opinion. I'm like Jonathan Moxon from Varsity Blues. Remember when he's fighting with his dad in his living room? And his dad's like, I want to talk about Gilroy, the game coming up. He's like, I want to talk about Gilroy. And Jonathan Moxon goes, Gilroy? Tell me who wins. And then walks out. That's where I am right now. Tell me who wins. This legal stuff, this administrative stuff, what players can get, what players can't get, especially in this union debate, I don't care. Just tell me how it ends. Because there's no right or wrong way to do this. It's amateur athletics. Well, actually, it is professional athletics under the guise of amateur athletics. It's beautifully dysfunctional. We always say on this show, college athletics, they're beautifully dysfunctional. There's no right or wrong way to this. Sure, you can have an opinion. You probably do. It's unrealistic. My opinion, unrealistic. No opinion on this is realistic. Because this is beautifully dysfunctional. There's no right or wrong answer. None. It doesn't exist. So tell me who wins. Tell me who wins. And at that point, we'll adjust. At that point, we'll say, oh, you're employees, you can get fired. Oh, you're not, we're going to keep things the same. You can make money on NIL, great. You can make money through the school and you are employees, fine. I don't care anymore. I don't care anymore. I just want to get back to talking about the sport. The sport. Now, I know I'm sitting here complaining about something that has nothing to do with the sport. And that's because everybody else, the mainstream media, everything you read is about this nonsense. I want power rankings. I know you hate them. I love them. Actually, you say you hate them. You actually love them. Just like you say you hate preseason polls, you actually love them. Why? Because the foundation of college football is that we get to argue with people. We get to yell at people. We get to call people. You can call me an idiot. You can hear this podcast. You can reach me on X. You can reach me on Instagram, Threads, TikTok, wherever. And you can call me an idiot. And I can say it right back to you. Because that's a feature, not a bug. The game itself is a feature, not a bug. I want to hear why you think USC is a fraud. I told you yesterday. And if you think USC is a championship contender, come at me. Tell me. Great. I want to hear it. I love it. But with this employee thing, with this national NLRB thing, with the union vote, tell me who wins. Just tell me who wins. And I'll be done with it. Reminder, this show brought to you by Coastal Vibe Vacations. Get ready for the ultimate family adventure. With Coastal Vibe Vacations, dive into fun under the sun, build sandcastles on pristine beaches, and create lasting memories with your loved ones. Our family-friendly resorts offer exciting activities for all ages, from poolside games to thrilling water sports, unwind in spacious accommodations that feel like a home away from home. Make this vacation unforgettable with the whole family. Coastal Vibe Vacations, where the sun, sea, and smiles come together. Book now for an ocean of family fun. We'll get to Michael Bratton in just a second. And look, we talked about power rankings. He's got some, and I love Michael. He's always there to stir the pot. He's always there to talk. He's always there to go toe-to-toe with anybody. You see him on Feinbaum. You see him everywhere. And so I cannot wait to get Michael's take on what happens in the SEC. You know him, you love him, Michael Bratton, SEC Mike, that SEC podcast, joining us here on the show. Man, it's great to have you on. You know, I've seen you go from SDS to now doing this independently. It's awesome to see your career jump like that. And welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Barrett. And, you know, it's something. I mean, I've got no association with Smothered and Covered, but it brings tears to my little black heart, Barrett, that you're bringing it back, because I've said it publicly. I'll say it here on your platform, but it is one of the shows that inspired me to do my own show. I listened to every episode. I loved it for years. I was devastated when it went away, and I'm just so thankful that you're back. And yeah, I'm happy to help you in any way. And it's like a dream come true to go from a guy that just listens to a show to actually get to be on it. This is the honor's all mine.
Well, I appreciate it. And look, it's interesting because when I started this back, you know, and a lot of people are in this space, right? It's kind of people say it's oversaturated, and they ask me, what are you doing? And I'm like, look, you know, there's no such thing as oversaturated. You know, we're all in this together. This is not like terrestrial radio when we're competitors. If people like my show, they're going to go to your show. They're going to go to Pate's show. They're going to go to JD's show. And it's interesting how different this is. And so, you know, it's great to have you on, and I'm so thankful with your kind words, because this is a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to this chat. First things first, let's look at your power rankings. You can see these pinned to the top of your Twitter profile. And so let's talk a little bit about this, because, you know, everybody loves power rankings. Everyone says they hate power rankings. They hate preseason polls. The truth of the matter is they love them, and that's why we do them. No surprise with Georgia, number one. But let's talk Ole Miss. And for the people who have watched the first 4 episodes of the show, they know exactly how I feel about Ole Miss. So let's break it down. What do you love about Lane Kiffin's Rebels?
Well, first of all, let me start very briefly on, because I think you mentioned it there. A lot of people, power rankings, it's not like I invented this or anything, but the way I do it, Team A meets Team B on a neutral field. That's the only criteria I use for these power rankings. So I don't care where the game's played, and sometimes, let's say Ole Miss lost to Alabama in Bryant-Denny by 1 point. I may turn around and still have Ole Miss ranked higher than Alabama. So some people get up in arms about that, but that's the only criteria I have. So I wanted to put that out there flatly. So yeah, Ole Miss, why do I like them? I mean, continuity I think is huge. Everyone gets lost in all the additions they've had via NIL and free agency, as Lane Kiffin calls it, which they were some massive additions, no doubt. But I think even more important is getting Jackson Dart back, getting Trey Harris back, getting key offensive linemen back, staff continuity. There's just so many things. And I think Ole Miss, for years, Barrett, I've heard people in our space and fans just saying, you cannot build a program like this. You cannot build a roster that will compete at the highest level doing this 1 year free agency. Well, now we're looking around, and that seems to be the best way to.
I was going to say that's the norm, right?
Right, but Lane Kiffin, to his credit, he was among the first to actually do it, and I think that has given them a heads up on how to tackle these big additions. Should we wait? Should we go in now? Should we throw in all our chips? And it looks to me like everybody associated with Ole Miss, whether it's in the program, outside the program, the NIL, the collective. They're all pushing their chips in for 2024, and Nick Saban stepping away, the one guy they couldn't beat.
Doors open.
And not just them. I mean, heck, hardly anybody could beat Nick Saban. But the fact that he's out now, it opens it up all the more for Ole Miss this season.
I'm with you. I 100% agree with you. And when we give our early 12-team playoff predictions, I had to do it when I was still at CBS the day after the national championship game. And there were a lot of people pissed off about that with different aspects of it. But I put Ole Miss in the 12-team college football playoff. And I assume at number 2 in your power rankings that you do as well. But let me ask you this. Is Ole Miss capable of actually winning the college football playoff this year?
I mean, I certainly think it's going to be difficult, but I've gone, Barrett, from saying Ole Miss should be a playoff contender to Ole Miss should be a national championship contender. So I do think they're in the conversation. They're going to need some breaks, certainly, I would think. I don't think they have the depth of Georgia, of Ohio State, and possibly even Alabama, which I'm sure we'll get to. But I just think that, as long as key players don't get injured, it's fascinating to see, Barrett. I mean, all due respect to blue chip ratio and the past 10 years of the playoffs says this, and the years of the BCS says this. People argue with that to me, and I say that's all garbage. I mean, that's great that you've done all the data and you've done the research, but we don't know. We don't know what it's going to take to win the 12-team college football playoff because it's literally never been done. And I think the transfer portal and I think NIL has proven that as great as the blue chip ratio and all that has been for years, you're starting to see, I don't want to say irrelevant because clearly Georgia and Alabama, I mean, teams that fit into that category are still major contenders. But how do you explain TCU getting to the national championship? And I realize their path was much more easier than an SEC team, but how do you explain
Cincinnati
Washington?
Got to the playoff.
Cincinnati. I mean, there's many examples that college football has changed, and I think that's great for the sport.
I agree with you. And as far as the blue chip ratio goes, these players get reevaluated and get different star ratings as members of the transfer portal. And so I think that needs to be factored. And there's no formula for that yet. We haven't figured out a formula for that yet. All right, let's get back to your power rankings, because I agree with you with Ole Miss. I disagree with you when and look, this is what makes this sport great. You can call me an idiot, I can call you an idiot, and we're all friends at the end, right? It's a feature, not a bug. Alabama 3, Texas number 4. I have Texas number 4. Actually, I have Texas number 2, Ole Miss 3, Alabama 4. So clearly you're still buying a little bit about Texas, what Texas is selling. But why are they behind Alabama in your power rankings?
Well, I love the fact that, Sarkisian does have it rolling, but I still, and I seem to be on an island on this one, Barrett, but I still question how elite Steve Sarkisian is as a head coach. And
okay.
it's fair to say that I think he's as good as he's ever been. So that's a fair argument as well. But if you just look at his record against top 25, you look at his record against teams with, he's been a head coach, I think, for 10 seasons.
Yeah.
He's got 2 where he's won more than 8 games, I believe. So, again, does that mean anything for 2024? Not necessarily, because, again, Texas, I think his latest Texas team was the best team he had. So I have some reservations about Sarkisian losing a ton of skill talent. Now, they have turned around and replaced them via the transfer portal. So I think it's easy to sit here and say, they'll insert this guy, they'll insert that guy, it'll be fine. But we know it doesn't necessarily play out that way. It's how will these guys fit into the system and things of that nature. So I don't know. I think there's going to be some reservations there. I know they lost their big defensive tackles, both going to be high-profile NFL draft picks potentially. And I just think going into the week-to-week grind of the SEC, I don't know if Texas is ready for it.
It's going to be fascinating because I think Steve has the right mindset and he's got the right blueprint. And I think they can win the line of scrimmage already, which is big. That's why they won that Alabama game in week 2. They won the line of scrimmage. They basically were built like an SEC team as still members of the Big 12. Now, I think what's interesting to me, and this is a tricky question because it's hypothetical, I think we all assume Alabama's going to kill it in the spring transfer portal. Right now, they don't have a team that can compete. Just right this very second, they don't have a team that can compete. But they're going to kill it in the transfer portal. If they do you think you could rank them number 2 or even number 1 based on the staff that Kalen DeBoer has hired?
Yeah, perhaps. And that's why I still have Alabama so high, Barrett, because I believe in the staff. And I listen to people like Dave Bartu who rank these coaches just based on the data. And he says Kalen DeBoer is essentially the top on-the-field coach, not recruiting, not staffing, but results on the field, arguably the top head coach in the country. So if he can live up to that, it's different. We've had a lot of quote unquote great coaches come into the SEC and they get exposed as not being so great. I don't think we're going to. I mean, it's a long list. So Kalen DeBoer could be next to be exposed by the SEC. I don't think he will, and I get it. They've lost an incredible amount of talent, particularly high profile talent. But this is still a top 10 roster, probably much better than that. Probably a top 5-6 roster in all of college football. You combine that with an elite head coach. You combine that with, I think they've upgraded, assuming Ryan Grubb stays on staff. I think they've upgraded at both offense and defensive coordinator. So
yes,
I think the coaching will be significantly better. And it may take some time, Barrett. I understand, and I believe they should be underdogs at home against Georgia. But thankfully, in this new 12-team format, losing one game is not going to kill you. And if they lose, then who knows? They may beat Georgia. But if they don't, it's not going to eliminate them from anything. I expect they'll be in playoff contention, national championship contention all season long.
It'll be interesting to see. Okay, number 10, Florida. I mean, Florida fans have to be looking at this going, God, why? How can this be? Because there's not an argument, right? Like they look at that your rankings and they're like, okay, yeah, we should be behind Florida. We should be behind Texas A&M and LSU. The schedule does no favor to Billy Napier. And, let's take the schedule into account. I don't like necessarily putting a number value on what coach X needs to do to keep a job, because 7-5 and 8-4, they can look completely different from each other. A 7-5, is completely different if Billy Napier does it this year than it would be if he did it next year or whatever. But what do Florida fans need to see to be excited about the future? Is there one or two things that you can look at and say, okay, record aside, these three things need to happen for fans to really jump back on board the Billy Napier bandwagon?
Well, Barrett, the funny thing is I put Florida 10th, and I think this is the one I got the most pushback on. How in the world can they not be lower? I mean, even Florida fans they're done with Napier. Not all of them, but a large swath of Florida fans already turning the page to whoever the next coach could be. I mean, I don't think there was anybody more upset that Jed Fish left Arizona than Florida fans, because that's who they have circled as their next head coach. But that's a different story. I'm not there yet, Barrett, and I realize the schedule is brutal, and that's what everybody looks at. And I don't know if you're familiar with Brad Powers' work, but yeah. He's a professional handicapper. He's one of the best out there. And I said, I put the over-under at 6 wins for the Gators this year, and he said, buddy, with this schedule, this is the toughest schedule I have seen in his 15 years being a Las Vegas handicapper. He said an average top 20 team would go 6-6 on this schedule, which I think we can agree, Barrett, Florida is not a top 20 team. Not today. They could be by the end of the season, but hope for Florida fans. I mean, I was among the many that kind of mocked the addition of Graham Mertz. That made no sense to me. I thought,
did all right.
Yeah, I mean, he was not spectacular, but he was not a disaster. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, he was steady. He was steady Eddie for them. And I realized losing Trevor Etienne, I mean, that's a big blow, particularly where he went. But I think they're going to be fine at running back. They've got several talented runners. That's Billy Napier's bread and butter. I know there's been some consternation among the Florida fan base to get Billy Napier a play caller, but quite frankly, I thought the offense, was quite well last year. And yeah, you end the season 5 straight losses. That's ugly. It's hard to make a case to why that was promising. But again, it was much like this upcoming schedule. It was the most brutal part of the schedule. They never gave up. They were in basically every game. I mean, they could have beat LSU, but they basically handed Jaden Daniels the Heisman that night. Missouri, that game went right down to the wire. Missouri just won 11 games. Had their quarterback not gotten hurt, maybe they beat Florida State. Of course, Florida State's quarterback got hurt too. So I don't know. I see some optimism there. Austin Armstrong, year 2. I'm a big believer in year 2 of a scheme. You generally see a bump. And all they need is Florida to just not be awful on defense, which is what they have been, quite frankly. And bringing in Ron Roberts to be kind of a co-DC linebackers coach. He's worked with Napier. He's worked with Austin Armstrong. It seems like that staff continuity will be there. And, losing Corey Raymond, again, that's another one that on paper looks bad, but Corey Raymond's a great recruiter, but it doesn't seem like he's been coaching up his defensive backs that well. Look no further than where LSU has been the last couple of years in the secondary and where Florida has been in the secondary the last couple of years.
Last thing, Mike, what do Auburn fans need to see from Hugh Freeze in year 2? Because I don't think they should stay with Peyton Thorne. I think they should still hit the portal after spring practice. What constitutes a good year? What constitutes a year where there's some excitement on the Plains?
Well, Barrett, it seemed like the same talking point was made endlessly last offseason when it came to Auburn was, this will be an underwhelming team, but you got to watch Hugh Freeze because he always gets somebody, right? And he nearly got Georgia. Should have got Alabama. So, I mean, maybe there's some fairness to it, but coulda, shoulda, woulda. I mean, that bowl game, and I realize fans don't generally care about bowl games. They care about them, Barrett, when they get embarrassed by Maryland in a game that, again, you lose that's fine. But if you basically no-show it, that's where you got an issue. And I just don't know what to make of Hugh Freeze right now, Barrett, because what is he? I call him Gus Malzahn with baggage. I mean, that's essentially what he is. And that's not totally being disrespectful because, Gus Malzahn's a good coach too. But I don't know. I don't know what is the selling point there. I mean, I realize they did really well in high school recruiting, but in today's modern college football, I think that's about worthless, Barrett, because if they go 5-7, 6-6 next season, I mean, some of those guys are probably going to hit the portal. And so what was the point of that? You know what I mean? Like, I realize you have to bring in touted high school recruits to improve your program, but why not do it with the portal as well? I don't know. It's like an old school approach for a new age of college football. I don't know how this is going to work. What we need to not see these dud performances. Why are we getting up for Georgia and Alabama, but we can't get up for New Mexico State and Maryland? I mean, to me, that's coaching, right? So we've got to get that turned around. And the fact that, it basically blew up his coaching staff which maybe some of that was not something that he wanted to do, but something he had to do. It almost feels like a year zero. And at Auburn, with the fans, with the support, with the talent they have, I mean, I don't think you could really sell that to an Auburn fan that we're so bad that we had to have a year zero. And I realized Harsin was awful. But again, Lane Kiffin, Josh Heupel, coaches like this, they come in and they turn the thing around pretty quickly these days. Heck, even Shane Beamer and Sam Pittman managed to do it. But, of course, those are not necessarily going so well right now. So maybe not the best examples. But we got to see more consistency, I think, from Auburn. I think that's the key.
As an Auburn alum, I can guarantee you patience is not something that we tend to have a lot of on the Plains. Mike, appreciate you hopping on that SEC podcast. You can follow yourself, or you can follow Michael W. Bratton. Anything else you want to plug before we hang up the headsets here?
No, just, we're on YouTube now. That's blowing up. That SEC podcast on all platforms. But truly, Barrett, this was an honor being on Smothered and Covered. This is, like I said, I'm not blowing smoke. This is one of the select few shows that inspired my show. So this is a real treat for me.
Well, I appreciate the kind words. Mike, appreciate it. And have a great Tuesday.
Absolutely. You too, Barrett.
All right, last thing before we wrap up the show today. National Signing Day, the traditional National Signing Day, is tomorrow, first Wednesday, I should say, of February. We had Tom Luganville on earlier in the show's existence, last Friday, I believe, and he talked about Ryan Williams being one of the bigger stories of traditional National Signing Day. Terry Bussey, Texas A&M commit, an athlete, 5-star athlete, basically wherever you go, consensus 5-star plus on a 3, is going to make an announcement. And he's been a long-time Texas A&M commitment, but he visited LSU. He's visited Georgia. This is not set in stone. Now, Texas A&M, you have to get him. Mike Elko, you have to get him. If you can beat out LSU and Georgia for one of the top players in the country, think about what that would do for the momentum of Texas A&M football. Everybody knew Jimbo was a recruiter. That was his claim to fame. Wasn't a very good coach, but certainly a good recruiter. Maybe the best in the country. Mike Elko, as a head coach, no, he's not. 2 years at Duke, he hasn't proven that he is an elite recruiter. Now, when he's an assistant, sure, absolutely. But as a head coach, we really haven't seen him go head-to-head with some of these big-time programs. Now he is. Now he is with a guy who's been committed before he even got there. If you can hang on, that is a massive statement, not just to LSU, not just to Georgia, but the entire college football world. Now, is Texas A&M going to be competitive in the SEC this year? Probably not. Probably not. The roster is not where it needs to be. It might be, though, in a couple years. And this is the foundational piece. All these kids talk to each other. We can talk about all these great coaches, these recruiters, and how tied in they are to high school program, and all that stuff's great. The best recruiters in the country are the players themselves. The best recruiters in the country are the players when they're at camps, when they're at high school games. They get to know each other. They talk on Snapchat, TikTok, wherever. And if you can get Terry Bussey in-house, he's going to look around and say, yeah, I stuck with Texas A&M because of X, Y, and Z. I could have gone to LSU or Georgia or wherever else in the country, literally anywhere else in the country, but I stuck with Texas A&M, and here's why. It would be massive, not just in the SEC, but around the country. Now, is it proof that Texas A&M is going to win the SEC and potentially make the college football playoff? No, it's not proof of that. I don't think you can have proof of that. Anybody who tells you otherwise is absolutely insane. But it will show that Mike Elko can be competitive in the SEC off the field, which, the old saying, it ain't the X's and O's, it's the Jimmies and the Joes. Texas A&M could get a big Jimmy/Joe. on Wednesday if Terry Bussey reaffirms his commitment to the Texas A&M Aggies. That'll do it for this edition of College Football Smothered and Covered. I appreciate you checking the show out. We will be live on YouTube and Rumble. We are live on YouTube and Rumble, but we will settle on a time here in a little bit. You can also, of course, catch the show Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, wherever you get your podcasts. We will be there. Enjoy your Tuesday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow, traditional National Signing Day here on College Football Smothered and Covered.